Rumors swirling from behind the scenes claim that when courtroom footage revealed old off-the-books photos of her husband, former President Barack Obama, standing shoulder to shoulder with Diddy at a private estate in Martha's Vineyard, she didn't just raise an eyebrow. Allegedly, Michelle Obama was furious. She demanded answers. Now, let's be crystal clear. This hasn't been confirmed by any official source. But the fact that whispers like this are even circulating says everything about just how explosive this case has become. Because what started as a high-profile celebrity scandal has now spiraled into something far darker. A story laced with blackmail, sealed federal documents, and whispers of a protection pipeline that may stretch all the way to the White House. One witness took the stand and named names. Not in tabloids, not in gossip columns, but under oath in a federal courtroom. Barack Obama, Reverend Al Sharpton, high-level agents, tech billionaires, even former CIA operatives. And all of them somehow tied, directly or indirectly, to the rise in immunity of one man, Shaun Diddy Combs. But this isn't just about parties and private jets. This is about who looked the other way, who shut down investigations, who kept the doors open when justice tried to walk in. Because if the allegations are even half true, Diddy didn't just outsmart the law, he was protected by it, enabled, shielded, and used as a pawn in a much bigger game. This video doesn't just tell the story of a fallen music mogul, it maps out a hidden empire. And by the time we're done, you might start wondering, how much power does it really take to stay untouchable? Nobody expected the trial to turn into this. What began as just another celebrity court case, one more headline involving Diddy and the usual vague accusations, suddenly detonated into something no one was prepared for. The courtroom was packed. Cameras weren't allowed, but the silence spoke volumes. Then the doors opened, and everything changed. A man in a dark suit walked in, briefcase in hand, no name announced, no badge shown. The judge simply nodded. That was the signal. This wasn't your average witness. This was someone who had operated deep in the shadows of the US government. They called him Special Agent Redacted, a high-ranking operative who had spent decades in the FBI's most elite units, organized crime and political corruption. He didn't waste time. No showmanship, no dramatic pauses. He sat down, opened his briefcase, placed a black folder on the table, and said words that made the entire room freeze. I've been tracking Mr. Combs and his enterprise for over 2 decades. What's new is that we're finally allowed to talk about it. From that moment on, the energy in the courtroom shifted. This wasn't about Diddy's business deals or personal scandals anymore. This was about protection, power, a network so deeply embedded that it had blocked investigations, reassigned agents, and erased evidence for years. The kind of system that doesn't just happen. It has to be built brick by brick, from the inside out. And what came next confirmed that theory in the most chilling way possible. But this was only the beginning. And the next revelation would shake the courtroom even more. What the agent revealed next wasn't wild speculation, it was a pattern. A timeline backed by documents, emails, and internal memos buried for over a decade. From 1999 to 2013, every time Diddy's name showed up in an investigation, something strange happened. Witnesses disappeared, investigators were reassigned, warrants were denied without explanation, and entire cases just vanished. One of the earliest examples came in 2001. The FBI was building a major case against a European affiliate of Bad Boy Records. Money was flowing through offshore accounts, invoices were forged, and the shell companies led straight to Luxembourg. It was textbook financial crime. The agents were ready to move, until their warrant request was suddenly denied. No reason, no appeal, just a dead end. That's when Special Agent Redacted realized this wasn't just about protecting a celebrity. We weren't dealing with fanboys in law enforcement, he told the court. We were dealing with interference from the top down, Washington-level interference. Files started going missing. Witnesses who had agreed to testify were abruptly relocated or stopped responding. Even internal communication logs from agents investigating Diddy's financial empire began showing redactions within the FBI itself. And if anyone asked questions, the answer was always the same. Drop it. The courtroom was dead silent. Jurors looked shaken. This wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was courtroom testimony, delivered under oath, by someone who had spent years watching the system fail from the inside. And then came the smoking gun, a detailed timeline showing over a dozen cases against Diddy, each one frozen, blocked, or mysteriously dismissed just as it neared prosecution. It didn't matter whether it was fraud or assault. The outcome was always the same. And suddenly, a disturbing truth started to emerge. This wasn't about Diddy being lucky. This was about Diddy being useful. And what came next proved just how far that usefulness went. By now, the jury was locked in. Reporters scribbled furiously. Everyone was leaning forward. That's when Special Agent Redacted dropped a moment that stopped the room cold. In 2009, he said, we submitted a wiretap request. We had reason to believe Mr. Combs was in active communication with known underground people. These weren't just shady acquaintances. We were talking about an international laundering network using bad boy-affiliated production companies as a front. The evidence was solid. Travel logs, phone records, shell corporations, everything they needed to move forward. The request was formal, approved by regional offices. It made its way up the chain to Washington. And then, just like before, it vanished. The wiretap request was pulled at the last minute, the agent said. The exact moment the request was rescinded matches a timestamp from a call made to a federal legal office affiliated with the White House. The courtroom stirred. One juror blinked in disbelief. Another dropped their pen. The prosecutor leaned in. Are you saying the White House shut down an FBI wiretap targeting Diddy? The agent didn't flinch. He held up the call log, a record showing the call's origin, timestamp, and duration. The name? Redacted. But the number was real, and it traced back to a secure government switchboard used by Presidential Legal Counsel. We're not saying President Obama personally made that call, the agent clarified, his voice steady. What we're saying is that someone within that administration had enough power to remove a federal surveillance request. And that kind of pull doesn't come from nowhere. Even the judge's posture shifted. The room had gone from scandal to something much darker, an uncomfortable intersection of celebrity, politics, and unchecked power. And just when it felt like the air couldn't get any thicker, the agent closed his folder and said, this wasn't about protecting one man. This was about maintaining a relationship. And that relationship gave Mr. Combs the kind of immunity most criminals could only dream of. But if that wiretap had gone through, it might have exposed something even more dangerous. And what the agent said next peeled back another layer of the rot. Just when it felt like the courtroom had heard the worst, the story took a darker turn. Special Agent Redacted opened his briefcase again, this time holding a small remote. A screen lit up behind him, revealing a grainy, still image from a surveillance room. Dozens of monitors lined the walls. Each one displayed a different location. Bedrooms, hallways, pools, and private studios, all from inside Diddy's Los Angeles compound. This footage, the agent began, was leaked by a whistleblower from a now-defunct private security firm hired by Mr. Combs. He explained that many of these cameras were hidden. The people on tape had no idea they were being recorded. And this wasn't just about monitoring staff or protecting assets. This was something else entirely. According to the agent, the FBI received a tip about 3 hard drives, allegedly containing thousands of hours of footage. Hidden cameras, intimate moments, vulnerable celebrities, political figures, business moguls. Some appeared intoxicated, others clearly coerced. In 2016, a warrant was finally issued. Agents were sent to seize the drives from a property believed to be one of Diddy's backup server locations. But when they arrived, the building was already on fire. Arson confirmed. The timing? Less than 20 minutes after clearance was granted. That fire wasn't an accident, the agent said flatly. Someone inside the system warned them. That's the only way they could have reacted so fast. But the story didn't end there. One drive survived. Recovered months later in Puerto Rico, stashed in a private safe deposit box under an associate's name. What agents found on it was deeply disturbing. A cache of footage showing high-profile individuals in compromising situations. Some were Hollywood stars, others were political donors, a few were even linked to international intelligence firms. And then came the question that silenced the entire courtroom. Was Barack Obama in those tapes? The prosecutor asked directly. The agent didn't hesitate, but several of his close allies, major donors, and campaign operatives were. And Mr. Combs referenced them by first name. He knew their secrets. He held the receipts. The implication wasn't just that Diddy was watching. It was that he was archiving, building leverage, piece by piece, over anyone who stepped into his circle. Not for ego, not for thrill, but for protection. The agent summed it up in one chilling sentence. He didn't collect this footage to satisfy his ego. He used it as currency, insurance, in case anyone ever tried to cut him off. And what that insurance protected him from would become even clearer in the next chapter. Because what happened on a quiet night in Martha's Vineyard pulled the veil all the way off. They called it a charity dinner. A quiet event, off the books, no press coverage, no public announcement. But what Special Agent Redacted showed the jury next shattered any illusion of innocence. A crisp, high-resolution photo was projected onto the courtroom screen. 3 men stood in dim lighting on the patio of a sprawling estate in Martha's Vineyard. Shaun Diddy Combs, former President Barack Obama, and Reverend Al Sharpton. No red carpet, no cameras. Just whispered conversations on private property owned by a tech billionaire with deep ties to both Hollywood and defense contractors. The agent paused, letting the image sink in. Then he dropped the detail that caused audible gasps. This event wasn't on any public schedule. We obtained the guest list through court-approved channels. And what we found were names linked to multiple sealed federal investigations, former CIA assets, sanctioned arms dealers, and representatives from TriStar Entertainment. According to internal memos, Diddy wasn't there as a guest. He was listed as a cultural intermediary, a term often used in intelligence circles to describe individuals who operate between political power and public influence. In plain English, he was the go-between, the messenger, the fixer. He wasn't there to raise money, the agent said. He was there to deliver information. And in exchange, his sins were forgiven. The jury sat stunned. This wasn't just about parties or politics anymore. This was about infrastructure, a shadow pipeline of influence and immunity stretching from recording studios to Washington backrooms. Diddy didn't need lawyers. He didn't need bribes. He had something more valuable: access, leverage, and secrets. Lots of them. Whispers filled the gallery. One juror looked visibly shaken. Even the judge seemed rattled, because the unspoken question now hanging in the air was chilling. If this was just one night, how many others were there? And that network wasn't just used for information sharing. As the next section reveals, it was also used to silence anyone who tried to speak out. By this point, the courtroom wasn't just shocked. It was overwhelmed. But Special Agent Redacted wasn't finished. What he revealed next turned the trial from scandal to strategy, exposing the blueprint of what prosecutors began calling a shadow empire. He introduced the FBI's codename for it, Project Ghost Room, a sealed 94-page dossier recovered during a 2022 raid on a climate-controlled storage facility in Newark, New Jersey. Hidden beneath a fake company front, agents discovered dozens of hard drives and a folder labeled BL Priority, Protected Archive. What was inside wasn't just evidence. It was a manual on manipulation. Inside the archive were flight manifests, handwritten notes, edited surveillance photos, and transcribed conversations. Many from hidden mics planted in nightclubs and event spaces Diddy frequented from 2004 to 2019. And then came the photos, dozens of them. Black and white snapshots of industry executives, political aides, and influencers, caught in compromising positions. Each photo was time-stamped, labeled with initials, and marked with words like leverage, verify use, and hush. This wasn't about memories, the agent said coldly. It was about pressure, power. These images were currency in a system designed to force cooperation, whether in the boardroom, the studio, or the Capitol. One case stood out. In 2017, a rising pop star allegedly refused to sign with one of Diddy's affiliated labels. Within days, tabloid rumors began circulating about her mental health. Less than 2 weeks later, she changed her mind and signed. Was it coincidence, or was it a signal? And then the bomb dropped. A single entry in the dossier read, BO plus RS/all handled. Payoff confirmed, donation received. The initials were never clarified, but whispers in the courtroom connected the dots. BO was believed to reference Barack Obama. RS matched a known studio executive tied to both TriStar and Diddy's distribution network. There were no direct recordings of Obama in the archive, but there didn't need to be. The implication was clear. This wasn't about one leader making shady deals. It was about an entire system quietly benefiting from Diddy's access to people, pressure points, and secrets no one else could reach. Agent Redacted looked the jury dead in the eye and said, this wasn't about throwing parties. This was about building a shadow empire. One night, one tape, one favor at a time. And if anyone dared speak out, what happened to the victims tells you exactly how this empire stayed standing. Until now, the courtroom had been dealing in power, influence, and paper trails. But when Agent Redacted returned with a manila folder marked Confidential Witness Files Declined, the story took a gut-wrenching turn. From strategy to survival. Inside were the voices no one had heard. Not because they didn't want to speak, but because they couldn't. 26 individuals had given statements during the early stages of the investigation. But none of them testified publicly. Why? Because of NDAs, intimidation, or fear that they, or their families, would face serious consequences. These aren't celebrities, the agent said. These are dancers, models, assistants, people who were used, threatened, and discarded. He read from the first statement, written by a former choreographer who worked inside Diddy's circle from 2005 to 2012. She claimed she was spiked at an after-party and woke up disoriented, bruised, and alone. When she tried to report the incident, her agency dropped her. Within a week, her phone was disconnected, her gigs canceled. She disappeared from the industry almost overnight. Next was a male model, just 19 at the time, flown to Miami under the pretense of a fashion shoot. What he walked into, the affidavit read, was more eyes wide shut than anything fashion-related. Cameras were everywhere. Phones were confiscated. A handler told him not to speak unless spoken to. And then came the most haunting account, filed under the codename CW11. A teenager, just 17 when he was introduced to Diddy by someone in his inner circle. The statement was brief but devastating. I thought it was a mentorship. It was never that. He told me if I left or said anything, my family would regret it. The courtroom was still. No coughing, no shifting, just silence. Agent Redacted held up a separate sheet. Names blacked out, but the dates and locations aligned with known Diddy events. The judge asked, "What is that list?" The answer was one word: confirmed. Confirmed victims, confirmed patterns, confirmed data points, no headlines, no social media posts, just pain, buried under fear and sealed documents. These were the people the spotlight had never touched, the ones silenced long before anyone said trial. And in that moment, it became clear. This wasn't just about leverage over power players. It was about control at every level. From presidents to teenagers, no one was safe if they stepped into that empire without giving up something in return. But Diddy's grip didn't just keep victims quiet. It allegedly reached into the highest levels of political machinery. And what came next could change how we view elections forever. By now, the courtroom didn't feel like a courtroom anymore. It felt like a live bomb ticking beneath the surface of everything people thought they knew about fame, politics, and power. But the final piece of testimony detonated the last illusion. Because what Agent Redacted revealed next didn't just tie Diddy to powerful people, it tied him to the democratic process itself. The agent approached the stand one last time, this time with a sealed transcript. The room held its breath. "This," he said, "is a verified transcript of a 2015 phone call intercepted between Mr. Combs and a senior figure at a major lobbying firm in Washington, D.C. The voices were analyzed. The metadata matched. The message? Undeniable." He read the quote aloud. "You said keep it off the radar, but I did my part. I brought in the dollars. I brought in the artists. We flipped 5 precincts blue last cycle. If I go down, some of y'all are coming with me." The courtroom exploded. A juror gasped audibly, "Jesus Christ." Others stared in stunned disbelief, trying to process what they'd just heard. Because this wasn't about parties anymore. This was about influence. Real political influence. Diddy wasn't just collecting secrets for leverage. He was allegedly mobilizing votes, shifting precincts, and making political plays behind closed doors. And if what he said on that call was true, he wasn't working alone. "We're not claiming this flipped an election," the agent clarified, "but we are saying Diddy used his celebrity platform and the network around it to influence political outcomes. And in exchange, he gained a level of protection almost no one else could dream of." And then came one last shocking detail. Just hours after Diddy's jet was flagged for search by the Department of Homeland Security, following a major scandal involving underage girls in St. Barth's, a phone call came from a secure White House line. The alert was rescinded in under 40 minutes. Within 48 hours, Diddy had donated $500,000 to a political action committee tied to Obama's re-election campaign. Coincidence? Maybe. But the courtroom didn't see it that way. Not anymore. Because by now, it was clear. Diddy wasn't just buying silence. He was buying relevance. And his currency was influence. Over artists, over institutions, and maybe, just maybe, over democracy itself. The judge recessed the court. Spectators left in stunned silence. And as the doors closed behind Agent Redacted, one question echoed louder than all the rest. How many more names are in that blacklist file? By the time the courtroom doors closed, it wasn't just about Diddy anymore. It was about the rot hiding in plain sight. The kind that doesn't just corrupt an industry, but an entire system. What started as a celebrity scandal unraveled into something much bigger. A pipeline of protection, manipulation, and quiet coercion that may have touched the highest levels of government, media, and corporate power. Special Agent Redacted didn't offer wild theories. He brought receipts, surveillance tapes, wire transfers, confidential witness files, photos, transcripts, and most damning of all, a list. A real documented archive of names, dates, and evidence compiled not for art, but for leverage. Diddy didn't just survive the system. He allegedly became part of its machinery. And when things got too close, files disappeared, cases were buried, agents were silenced, all while his influence grew, not just in music or fashion, but in politics, finance, and intelligence circles. It raises a chilling thought. How many others are out there, untouchable because of what they know, or what they're willing to trade? And then there's the question no one in the courtroom could answer, but everyone was thinking, if this is what made it to trial, what didn't? The cameras were off. The reporters left. But somewhere in a vault, or on a hard drive, or whispered through a back channel, the blacklist remains. Quiet, protected, and possibly still growing. Because this story wasn't just a fall from grace. It was a glimpse behind the curtain, at a world where power protects power, truth is negotiable, and justice only arrives when the secrets are no longer useful. Let us know what you think in the comments. Was this about one man? Or is he just the first domino to fall?